So, welcome, Craig, founder of the Spaceship Academy. If you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, it's good to be with you, Alex. So, my name is Craig Wazina. I'm the founder and CEO of the Spaceship Academy. A bit about myself, I'm an American, but I've been living here in France, just outside of Paris, for 26 years now. I came over in my early 20s to teach history at the American School of Paris and thought it'd be really nice for a year or two to live here. It's just a place we fell in love with. We never left. So I'm an educator at heart, but for the last 8 years, I've been a full-time entrepreneur, and entrepreneurship skills applied to helping people and planet is really the core of what our work is.
And how was your experience in education, particularly in school and university? How did you find that?
I guess from a young age, like it was kind of all I knew was the game of education, and I always found my way with some relative success. And so I think it came naturally to me when I started working in schools. But to your question, there was at a certain point impatience, I would say, in the sense of, there's so much that education continues to do that is, unnecessary, and so many things that education does not do that I found was quite urgent. And I felt in order to act on those things, I needed to get out of the actual school environment, and into the entrepreneurship world, to try to address those. And that sort of dynamic, like, schools are very traditional and conservative, and yet there's so much potential with innovation. Like, how do you kind of square that circle is a really, really big issue in education right now.
And was the Spaceship Academy the first business that you started?
No, actually, my going back to actually the early 2000s, my first entrepreneurship experience was starting sports camps for youth, here in the Paris area. A good friend of mine, Jason Basin, and I always were involved in youth sports growing up, and we always felt like so much of what we learn about, social emotional skills, about, getting back up when you fail, about, perseverance, a lot of like sort of the things that we know when we're adults are the most important things, we kind of learned through being on teams and, and those relationships and those experiences. So in Europe, as you know, it's a little bit different than in the US. There's more focus on, it's a club system, there's more focus on teaching skills and games, and it's not the same type, especially at a young age, the same type of, okay, team building and some of the social emotional stuff that I talked about. So we were running camps, and we learned the hard way a lot of lessons about entrepreneurship, but we were doing something that we really believed in. And I'm not sure we made any money, but that was invaluable, I think, for both of us regardless.
What particularly about it was invaluable? What skills did you learn?
Well, one of the skills I think anyone who's in entrepreneurship has to learn by doing is it's not enough to have a good idea. You need to understand not only what are the needs of the people that you want to serve, but how are you going to basically reach them and sell to them. And so I think my naive assumption when I was in my early 30s was, if we offer something that's great, people will come. And we kind of neglected the process of, how do you actually get your word out there? How do you build that brand? How do you grow something that's going to be profitable and not just, nice to have? And
And
that's,
what was it that made you start the Spaceship Academy?
yeah. So I think entrepreneurship skills in particular, like I really feel I grew up as child of entrepreneurs. My parents ran a restaurant. We lived upstairs. I kind of saw or learned through osmosis like the reality of being an entrepreneur. But it never really occurred to me that I had those energies, in the sense that, being your own boss, you get excited about an idea, being able to act on that and not having to, build huge consensus every time as you might need to in a school or other environments. Like those energies, I think, as I matured, you just realize like that sort of, you know, that energizes me, right? Like that kind of work is just something I need to do. So it was really just a question of like, okay, what problem do you want to solve then, right? And for me, it was actually in 2015, it was like, where where are young people learning some of the mindsets and skill sets of entrepreneurship? Like, how did our parents or our grandparents learn them? Like, it's really, you learn by doing, but especially in the world we live in right now, changing so fast, disruption everywhere, exponential technologies changing almost every industry. Like, if you can't think entrepreneurially in a world like this, you're going to have a hard time adapting. You're going to have a hard time creating the life that you want to create. It can be done, and certainly there are fields that are always going to be essential and that require the same types of, how do you get there? But a lot of things, if you can't adapt, if you can't innovate, if you can't, see opportunities and challenges, you're going to struggle. And so, to your question, it was, well, how can we start to do entrepreneurship programs with younger people, with schools, so that this innovation mindset becomes part of what's in the water.
And that sounds great. And how is the demand for this sort of thing for entrepreneurial thinking?
There's a huge demand in one sense, in the sense that, like, I think, again, I'm an American, so let's say that probably I'm biased towards like what I understand is in the conversation in the US, but I think more and more school leaders and policy leaders would agree entrepreneurship is kind of a core fundamental skill for the future. But schools are not entrepreneurial by nature. Schools are very conservative by nature. So the challenge for us in the early days was, how do we kind of meet schools where they are, where the entry points, are these after school programs or vacation programs, are these asynchronous programs? That is the biggest challenge in the business, is like working with schools on things that they need. It's a slow process, and every school is different, and there's a lot of logistical things that can make it very complex.
And is it difficult to communicate your value at all? Because I think for me, the way I see it sometimes is like people see entrepreneurs as like people that are born, you're born an entrepreneur, and
Mm.
rather than being able to learn these skills. So I wonder if you have to challenge any of these sort of views at all.
I think, yeah, there's a little bit of that, in the sense of, okay, what do you need to learn, or how do you get into entrepreneurship, and maybe some mental barriers in the sense that, well, I have no training in this or whatever. But I think there is an aspect of it where it's innate. But the biggest thing with entrepreneurship is, start small and just keep testing and iterating and testing and iterating. And even that process, like sort of that design thinking process, is one that a lot of forward thinking schools right now are teaching from an early age. So they don't necessarily call it entrepreneurship, but design thinking, which also is not that different from the scientific method in a way. But like these just sort of frameworks now are, I find, is increasingly over the last 10, 20 years, are becoming embedded more in schools.
And when you first started out, how did you get your first customers?
Well, I was fortunate in the sense that I had worked in some great international schools for 20 years, and so I had networks of people that I could reach out to, and I could kind of pick their brain. And so, like with a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors, I think we start with the people we're closest to, which made a lot of sense for us.
And what have been the biggest challenges for you so far?
Well, since COVID especially, we've been working more with businesses. And so the challenges of working in education, in the business world, we don't necessarily call it education. We call it, upskilling or professional development or whatever, but it's the same idea. Um, the challenges in schools, where, as I mentioned, is just really hard to seamlessly enter into what's already happening during a school year. Businesses, the challenge has been more, we are focused on sustainability, and sustainability is something that businesses have been more and more accountable for. And I know the political winds are starting to change, or are changing. But anyway, people, stakeholders, customers, investors, they care about sustainability. They expect results and movement in the right direction. But if you're a business leader, your first priorities traditionally are the bottom line ones, right? How are we going to increase our profits and reduce our costs and all of that? The biggest challenge is how do we align these sustainability outcomes with those traditional bottom line outcomes? And it's not that difficult to align those things, but in a lot of people's minds, they see them separately, and so that's something that makes it more difficult.
See them separately. Like how do you have to go about trying to change this way of thinking?
Depends on the business, but I think what we found is a couple of things. One, because I want to talk about AI because it's so huge, in terms of how we do things these days. But let's say before AI, the more we can understand about a business and its value proposition, the more we can enter the sustainability conversation, speaking directly to their realities and their opportunities. But if you take something really kind of universal like energy consumption, right? Those are huge, huge bills, both in our homes and in our businesses. And there are so many low hanging fruit ways to reduce your energy consumption, reduce your bills, and accomplish both at once. And that's a really simple example, but there are many, many others that we can help our clients find.
Obviously, you prioritized going into entrepreneurship in a socially impactful way. Do you find this as ever challenging? And by that I mean like commercially versus social impact, balancing the two.
I would say it's a good question. Yes and no. No, in the sense that there are not a lot of, it's not a crowded field right now in terms of businesses that are focused specifically on education for sustainability or education for better outcomes for people and planet. So it's not a crowded space, but it is very new to businesses. It is, and it's very new to a lot of people. You have to kind of explain what you do before you can tell them why they need it. I mean, you have to explain what it is before they can see that themselves. Actually, I think what is also challenging with sustainability is a lot of companies right now have like the person who is the sustainability person, or they have a couple of people who are the sustainability people, and that's not how sustainability works, right? If you really want to grow a culture, if you really want something to be operational across the business, it can't be a silo in that office or in that corner, and that's where most businesses still are today, unfortunately. But a lot of, I would say, respected leaders in the business world are starting to agree more and more that the capacities, the abilities, the skills of sustainability leaders are actually essential skills for leadership across the board in the future, right? So it may well be that CEOs of major companies a little bit down the road are unlikely to be hired if they don't have some sustainability leadership, some demonstrable experience in that. Right. So that's the hope is, and it's probably not going to happen as fast as we want, but it moves away from those people who are the sustainability people to all of us have, a shared culture in understanding why this is important. And the leaders in that business are proven in leading in sustainability as much as they are in profit building.
How does a company, build a culture like this? Because I can imagine they've got so many competing priorities, whether it be sustainability, literacy with AI, tech, data.
Yeah.
How do you go into companies and convince them that they can do it, it's manageable, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question. Hopefully, if they're talking to us, they don't need to start from the beginning in terms of understanding why this is important. But I think there are some exemplars and sort of blue ribbon examples of companies that have both greater outcomes for sustainability and business outcomes that are respected. They're sort of household names. And so they may be thinking, well, we know these other companies have done it in our context, how do we do it? And so it's not like we have to convince them, here's the outcome that you want. We can focus more on, the how. It's not so much the why. It's like, okay, how are we going to get there? If we need to target the why, which we do, they're probably not going to be our clients, yet, right? They probably need a little more time to understand the why before they get to us.
And have you taken funding, or would you go down the funding route, and if so, why?
As an entrepreneur? Yeah, that's a really good question and a timely one. So I've been a part of ventures that have taken professional capital, and I've advised a lot of companies that have raised a lot of money from venture capitalists. I think it really depends on the nature of your business. So right now we are still an education for impact company, but we are AI first. And depending on the types of AI that you're building, maybe you can do it relatively inexpensively. But for a company like ours that is building a platform, it's really hard to do something like that without a team of engineers and therefore some investment. So I really am two minds, to be totally transparent with you. I would like to continue to build just through revenue and actual contracts our business. Like, I think that's the best way to do it. And yet the reality is, if we want to do this, we've got to most likely take on investment. So I guess what the other side of that is, and you probably know this, like, there's so much noise right now with AI, and there's so many companies who are raising incredibly large amounts of money right now. And there's also sort of a growing like understanding gap. What's the difference between this AI and that AI? Like, what does responsible AI mean? Like, all the different implications. Like, this, people are brand new to these questions, and so it's even for investors who are focused on AI, they're early in the learning curve. And that like, just like with the business, it makes it that much harder to raise.
Yeah, and I suppose with AI moving so fast, like even if you are somebody who is, quite technically proficient and up to date with it, it can 2 weeks or a month of not following the latest AI trends and you're behind. Like I think yesterday I was seeing something of ChatGPT releasing animations, and it's crazy how fast it's moving.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this week, there was some huge things that came out, and all of a sudden people need time to digest that. Like, well, okay, what does this mean? How do I now understand things differently? And that's only going to accelerate. A lot of the huge developments and breakthroughs that would have been headline stories of every newspaper a couple of years ago, now you're lucky if you even hear about it. Right. So I guess that's the other thing that motivates me. I'm a parent as well as an entrepreneur. I care about education. Like, how on earth are people going to keep up with this? Like, what is that going to look like? It seems like an impossible task, right? It doesn't matter what field you're in. Let's say you're in. I mean, very, very soon, every day there's going to be a major breakthrough, right? And very soon, like every week, something new will be possible. So I think what you're doing, what we're doing, which is, kind of understanding what are people's problems, how does technology, potentially serve that? That's helpful for us because it forces us to stay sharp, right? But the average person, I mean, schools have got to find a way to be more nimble. Instead of cruise ships, we got to be, little motorboats, solar powered motorboats. But it's way too cumbersome and clunky right now. We've got to find a new model.
What most excites you about AI, or what most scares you? Is there anything specifically?
I'm concerned about lots of things with AI. I'm excited about even more things, but I'm very concerned about our inability to really understand what we're dealing with AI and how powerful this is and how truly transformative and disruptive of virtually everything it's going to be. And I say that not because I want that to be the case. It will be. Like, there's just no question it will be. And so what is that going to mean to people? What is that going to mean for our planets? I mean, you can see the toll that AI use takes on water usage, and we'll see all sorts of other environmental effects, and decisions that are made to address those will have their own knock-on effects. So I think leadership is especially important in this age, like really responsible leadership. But even for leaders, the instinct to, take things slow and careful, which is a good instinct, just doesn't work. Just doesn't work right now. So we're ill-equipped. We don't have any sort of precedent to help teach us how to cope with this moment.
And you said you're a parent as well. How do you envision that being for your children? Like, I'm imagining it when I was younger, it was like get your maths and English, then maybe learn to code or something, you'd be fine. Whereas now you could tell a child to learn to code at the age of 12, and by they're 15, code's all being written by machines, and it's now a somewhat redundant skill. So just curious your thoughts on there.
I'm curious, Alex, did you learn coding growing up?
Well, no, I learned after university.
Yeah. So me too. Like I growing up, I didn't really learn how to code, and I think my instinct is it's very different that skill in terms of its importance right now, but I think it'll always be important to kind of understand how computers are taught and how computers
for
think.
sure.
And, so I think it's a very relevant question right now because I have a 15-year-old who loves math and who loves physics, and so the sort of things that she could be really interested in programming. So I want to make sure I give her good advice if I give her advice. But yeah, I don't think it's going away, and I also don't think it's easy to predict which fields are going to be less relevant and which ones are going to be more relevant. We probably would have thought that artists are going to be safe, and they're probably the most vulnerable right now. So yeah, it makes it harder as a parent for sure. I guess what I would worry most about, and I've always been pretty not relaxed, but like not too worried about the effects of technology on my kids, because I see the way they're using it. I kind of try to keep track of it, but the technology that becomes so smart that it will be able to easily deceive and easily cajole and manipulate and obviously sell to you and get you to do things that you wouldn't maybe do of your own free will. Like I don't know how we can build the guardrails, but as a parent, whatever challenges we've had over the last 10 years are going to be so much worse over the next few, for sure. Just the way that technology can understand all of us, and the more it understands, the more it can control. And I'm a techno optimist more than a pessimist, but I guess I just see that as a matter of fact.
I agree. I think people have always been saying how times now are scary, like when the internet came out, even when the printing press came out, etc. But it really does feel like now things are quite. Like, I'm a techno optimist as well, but things are going to change a lot and very quickly, and it's very weird to think about. Like, I think there's going to be major change in the job. I mean, it's already apparent that there's going to be change in the job market, but I'm seeing people actually get laid off and then finding it hard to get jobs. It's like, I really do wonder what the future holds.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's an amazing time to be alive. I wouldn't necessarily want to be alive or born or at any other time, but yeah, there's huge unknowns.
Yeah. And you said you've been in Paris for a long time. How has it been building a business in a country that's not your home country?
It's been really interesting being an entrepreneur in France. A couple of things that might surprise, because it totally surprised me. So in 2016, when I became a founder, I was very fortunate to be a part of the world's largest startup campus, which they had just built in Paris, called Station F, and it's an old train station, beautiful old train station with hundreds of deep tech startups, not only French, but some around the world as well. But what surprised me is the official language of Station F, of this entire campus, is English. And when I moved to France in 1999, it was very rare to see English spoken in the business world, or outside of the American school where I worked. And today, it really does, not just at Station F, like it really seems like the official startup language, even in France, is English. I think France is doing a great job of developing its ecosystem, AI in particular. I think in Europe, it's kind of distinguishing itself and very intentionally trying to develop, ecosystems of investors and founders and, all of those things. I think I've learned a lot here that would have been hard for me to learn, on my own for sure. But even just um, if I was still living in the US, like this type of structure was really helpful for me. There are drawbacks of being an entrepreneur in France, including their famous social charges. If you pay an employee, you can usually expect about 75% in charges on top of whatever you pay the employee here. So that's still really, really difficult for an entrepreneur. We are not registered in France. We're registered in the UK. We probably would be registered in France if that wasn't the case. The very high social charges, but at the same time, the French government does a lot to support startups here, and I think it's a well kept secret that France is actually very entrepreneurial.
And you said that English is generally the language of startups, but when you're speaking to schools and businesses, do you have to speak a lot of French or?
No, because we don't really have a lot of French clients. Most of our clients are in Asia or North America. So yeah, it hasn't been an issue. But the few clients that we have had in France, we can conduct those in English, which again has been a nice surprise.
Yeah, that's true. I guess with like the modern world as well. Like for instance, me, I work mainly with American businesses, so you don't always have to do business with those who are necessarily in your geographic location. You can do
Yeah.
it all around the world, right?
Yeah, well, our team is totally virtual. Our CTO is in Oxford in the UK, and our other co-founders in Los Angeles, and our fourth is in the south of France. So we do a couple times a year make a point of seeing each other face to face. But yeah, we're navigating this virtual organization in a way it's really interesting. I like it personally.
Yeah, it's great. I'm sure it's got its drawbacks, but it is definitely great.
Yeah.
And what are your plans for the business? Like, how do you see the future of it going?
So I think if we think about the potential of AI, the way that we are envisioning what we build is moving from, let's say, discrete tools that are specially trained in particular domains or particular topics, trained by human experts. So first of all, that's our very strong conviction that the best AI has humans in the loop and is human centered, and it is humans who are constantly like refining, understanding, and controlling these tools. But to your question, what we want to create is in the next year or two a platform where all of these discrete tools can collaborate with each other and together give you kind of one-stop shop for expertise across sustainability topics. Also, coaches, so AI coaches who can help take this from a conceptual level to like an actionable level. So you might be interested in like what are some circular economy strategies to sort of design out waste, and you're learning conceptual things about that. But you can also ask, well, what are some examples or some case studies, and then you can say, well, here's what I'm interested in. And this AI will serve as your coach to kind of bring you along step by step. And that's the piece, going back to education, that I still see as the holy grail. Like if education was less about, we're going to test your conceptual understanding of things and more about you understand these concepts now, how might we apply them to ways that actually add value to the world, right? Well, the current model, even if, because so many teachers would say they want that, it just doesn't work very well. Like a teacher can't have expertise for every child's project. A teacher can't have the time to sit by you and kind of take you through on demand, what you need. Great teachers try that, but AI actually makes it very possible. So that's sort of the vision that we have is, a very personalized coach that can help you to do the things that you want to do that will serve others.
Outside of business, how do you like to learn or stay up on topic with new things?
I love podcasts, and as you do too, I know. I don't, it's such a simple idea. I don't know why it wasn't invented 50 years earlier.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, I think podcasts are my go-to.
Nice. Do you have any particular one, any favorites or?
Actually, it depends. I love sports podcasts. I love tech podcasts. Try to stay away from the news more these days. But no, I've probably got dozens of them on a rotation. But yeah, I think also the other key thing is newsletters. There are certain newsletters that I think are going to be ahead of the mainstream media or other, other sources. So yeah, there's some good ones.
And last question, what's the best piece of advice you've been given, or maybe the best quote you've seen, or maybe a guiding principle, something like that?
I think I can't say who gave me this advice, or I can't think of one particular person, but I think the best advice for anyone who's interested in entrepreneurship is, learn by doing. Like if you think you have an idea, find a way to, in a very low risk sense, to test it, to gather feedback on it, figure out if there's a there. And especially today, time is being freed up constantly by AI. Even if you have a full-time gig, it's possible on the side to start testing some of your entrepreneurial ideas, whether that's for profit or just to improve whatever problem you care about. But I think that's a superpower if people can see themselves, in addition to their other identities, see themselves as change makers or entrepreneurs or whatever, and try to practice it. That would be. I know I've gotten that advice, and I know it changed the way I approach my thinking, but yeah, I wish we all kind of thought that.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I think the only way you can really learn properly with these sort of things is by doing. You can read 1,000 books, but I think 100 hours of doing would outweigh that for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Craig, founder of the Spaceship Academy, thanks so much for joining and telling us about yourself, your business experience, and the great things you're doing. Absolute pleasure, and thanks very much.
I enjoyed it, Alex. Thank you.